Remember, my admonition is not to ever believe anything you hear from the mouth of anyone, or that you read from the book written by anyone, or from Dan Rather in the 6 o'clock news, or the President of the United States, or Chuck Carter, Tom Valentine, Rush Limbaugh, the man who's sitting on half of his brain, or indeed from even your own mother. Folks, we've got to get you back into the stream. And the way I do that is I quit telling you about my research and I quote exactly from the horse's mouth, so you'll know that what you're hearing on this program, The Hour of the Time, is not being made up by me or anyone else. And it's there for anyone to find if you'll just get off your butts and go to the library and start digging and looking and searching and reading, and quit listening to what you're told, including what you're told on this show. But I am asking everyone to quit accepting what they are told, to begin an honest, individual, personal search for the truth. For we can no longer live in deception. We can no longer live the lies of the past. Great change lies ahead of us, folks. Change will come whether we want it or not, for that is the way of the world and the way of the universe. And if we are still living in lies and deceptions and manipulations, then that change will be for the bad, just as it has always been throughout the history of the world, and blood will flow and people will suffer, all in the name, once again, of religion. And I, for one, am sick of it.
Information is based upon research derived from the information that I saw. For instance, in the documents that I saw, it was stated that President Eisenhower had commissioned a group called the Jason Scholars, which was stated to have been a secret society of scholars, to research the deception, lies, facts, truth, and get at the root and the real truth of the alien question.
What is Father Funes doing, who is the chief priest of the Vatican Observatory, comes out in the Osservatore Romano saying ETs could possibly exist and they are our brothers? Everybody's getting their ducks in a row, including the Vatican, for some kind of disclosure which might be palatable to the world.
Learn why these Vatican astronomers are involved with Project Lucifer, using a special infrared camera attached to the most powerful telescope on Earth that peers into deep space, searching for aliens and UFOs.
Initial instrumentation includes twin blue and red cameras for wide-field imaging, as well as nulling interferometry capabilities to spot distant planets, advanced spectroscopy devices, and a near-infrared imager and spectrograph called Lucifer.
Flammas eius, Lucifer matutinus inveniat. Ille in quam Lucifer qui nescito casum, Christus filius tuus, qui regressus ab inferis, humano generis serenus iluxit, et tecum vivit et regnat in saecula saeculorum.
How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
It also stated that there was a group of 12 men formed by NSC Memo 5410, and that the study group was formed by NSC Memo 5411, and that there was another NSC memo issued to cover the actions of these men and explain the reasons why such prominent men were meeting on a regular basis, and that NSC memo was 5412/1 and 5412/2. 5412/1 was implemented in March of 1955, 5412/2 in November of 1955. Anyone who knows how correspondence, executive orders, and executive memos are written knows that you do not write a memo 5412 in March and then in November tack a second part onto it. The memo was originally really written in 1954. I'm going to go through the whole history. I'm going to have to leave a few things out simply because it's going to be impossible to cover everything in the hour and a half that I have. Now, ladies and gentlemen, during this talk that I'm going to give you, I'm going to explain to you the history of this phenomenon, who the secret government really is, and I will name them by name, beginning group, the study group. I will tell you who they are today. I'm going to tell you what this is all about. I'm going to tell you who's selling drugs to your children, and I'm going to tell you why the United States government is afraid for you to find out what the truth is regarding UFOs. I'm going to skip over the early saucer recoveries, but there are many more than what you would expect. The early saucers Is this any better? There were many more saucer crashes and downed craft than what you have realized. There were many more alien bodies recovered, and there were more live aliens recovered than what you are aware of. But that's not important. The important thing is that they occurred, not how many and not where. The important thing is that they occurred. And those of you who want to argue over how many and where and how many bodies are wasting the time of everyone else, because that's not important. What's important is that they occurred. And there are two crashes that are so important that the government will go to any lengths to prevent you from finding out. And those are two crashes which occurred near the city of Aztec, New Mexico. Why? Because both of those crashed craft contained human body parts.
In the meantime, I think that this kind of dialogue between researchers is so important, because you see how we can cross-correlate the information that we've got, because when it's unsubstantiated, it stands alone. But when you start getting multiple witnesses coming forward from completely different directions, and they all say the same thing, then people have to sit up and take notice.
And the third type is what we've come to call the processing plant. And this, again, often has both human and alien personnel working in it. And in this underground processing plant, what we get reported over and over again is a setup in which human body parts are being processed like chicken or beef. They are being flayed, they are being dismembered, they are being drained of blood, they are sometimes reported stacked up like firewood, sometimes hanging, draining, sometimes going down, being dismembered as they go towards some unknown end facility.
What happened here? So what happened is in one of the UFOs they found a locker full of human body parts. So this is something that the Greys do. They use our body parts. We are big business galactically. So in our glands too are big. You know, they use it because that's their energy. They can't create their own passion, so they try to feed off ours.
One day I got an email from Australia, and this woman by the name of Karen Leister sent me the pictures of a human mutilation. And it's the same scenario, had one ear missing and a little cut on the chest, and you know, his sex organs and the rectum was cut out.
Reports of human mutilations started in 1960. Human mutilations have been reported in the USA, Brazil, Australia, and New Zealand. Some notable cases are known to have been authenticated by authorities in USA and Brazil. The most famous and perplexing was the São Paulo case in Brazil. Having been discovered in a major city, the police department were very thorough in their investigation, and the autopsy was conducted by forensic experts. The autopsy report is one of the most disturbing documents ever researched by the Beyond team, partially because it proves that the characteristic mutilation wounds were accomplished with specifically designed tools and pumps, and the wounds show vital reactions, meaning that the man was living throughout the process. The cause of death was determined from the internal damage to the brain and heart to be cardiac arrest due to extreme pain. There was an absence of blood and evidence that certain organs and even muscles had been somehow removed through small cookie-cutter holes. Even more confusing is the fact that there were no signs of struggle or resistance.
I'm going to tell you something a little bit different about the alien species. The bad news ones, there are 9 races of alien populations. To look at a human being as a bag of food. They're not cannibals. They don't eat the flesh and the bones and all that kind of stuff. They use the glandular secretions of animals and human beings as a mixture of the vitamins for their food. They get high off of our adrenal gland substances called adrenochrome.
And he also said that they would rip you apart. That was what he said, and he said that he did get a view of inside this particular landed UFO, and he said that there was all kinds in there, and he implied that there was human body parts in there. He said he witnessed 3 distinct types of ETs on these missions. He stated that in 4 or 5 of these cases there were craft debris, and they were able to see what had been on board the craft. This included human and animal body parts.
And they are deathly afraid of a national panic.
I asked him about the injuries to try and get him to describe the injuries that have been found on some of these recovered corpses, and he just said, you just wouldn't want to see it. I asked him about the statement in Derek Goff's notes that they witnessed between 30 and 40 mutilated human beings. He confirmed that. He confirmed that, you know, there's a lot of cases, and he said that it was something you would not want to see. And the largest recovery of bodies was in Australia, a case where 24 bodies had been left. Injuries are the same as animal mutilation type injuries. He said that internal organs would be removed and also brains. He seemed to think that anything connected with the nervous system is what they would take. He did not see a lot of blood on the corpses. They usually choose remote, out-of-the-way places to carry out human mutilations. They knew where to go and where to take from, where the people would not be missed for a long time. Bodies included people and children.
Respected UFO researchers have expressed concerns over the apparent need for the media to bury or downplay stories of human mutilations for fear of bad taste, public reaction, or even the possibility of being seen to validate the peripheral UFO communities.
Because of this, there was a very, very tight security blanket screwed down tight over all of the alien question. The downed craft, the fact that they were here, the technology that we were recovering. Some craft, strangely enough, were not damaged at all. But we could not recognize anything that we had previously known as mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, or any other thing that we knew of, except eventually we discovered that the craft contained a small reactor approximately the size of a large football or a small basketball, which was said to be a clean reactor, and the craft, this particular craft, used or seemed to use water as fuel. Now, how that all works, I don't know. I am not a nuclear physicist. Thank God. A special group of America's top scientists were organized under the name Project Sign in December of 1947 to study the phenomena.
Run out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, codenamed Project Sign.
There was no such thing at that time as MJ-12. The whole nasty business was contained within the shroud of secrecy. Project Sign evolved into Project Grudge in December of 1948. A very low-level collection and disinformation project named Blue Book was formed under Grudge.
Project Blue Book is nothing more than a publicity campaign.
16 volumes were to come out of Grudge, including the controversial Grudge 13, which I and Bill English saw, read, and revealed to the public. Blue teams were put together to recover the crashed discs and dead or alive aliens.
In 1948, there was something called a Blue Force. The USA military removed all the UFOs.
The blue teams were later to evolve into alpha teams under Project Pounce and Project Pluto. During these early years, the United States Air Force and the Central Intelligence Agency exercised complete control over the alien secret. The Air Force was later to be dropped because it was a young service and had no political power and could not overcome the power of the Army and the Navy. In fact, the CIA was formed by presidential executive order, first as a Central Intelligence Group for the express purpose of dealing with the alien presence. Later, the National Security Act was passed, establishing it as the Central Intelligence Agency. The National Security Council was established to oversee the intelligence community and especially the alien endeavor. It was not created specifically to form national policy. In fact, you can say that the National Security Council was the forerunner of MJ-12, and there was another group between MJ-12 and the National Security Council, which is to come later. A series of National Security Council memos and executive orders removed the CIA from the sole task of gathering foreign intelligence and slowly but thoroughly legalized direct action in the form of covert activities at home and abroad. On December 9, 1947, Truman approved issuance of NSC-4, entitled Coordination of Foreign Intelligence Information Measures, at the urging of Secretaries Marshall, Forrestal, Patterson, and the Director of the State Department's Policy Planning Staff, Kennan, who, by the way, were all members of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Foreign and Military Intelligence Book 1, Final Report of the Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with Respect to Intelligence Activities, United States Senate, 94th Congress, Second Session, Report number 94-755, April 26, 1976, page 49 states, this directive empowered the Secretary of State to coordinate overseas information activities designed to counter communism a top-secret annex to NSC-4, which was NSC-4 Alpha, or 4A, for those of you who are confused by military terms, instructed the Director of Central Intelligence to undertake covert psychological activities in pursuit of the aims set forth in NSC-4, and secretly was to run a psychological operation against the American public to hide the presence of UFOs and aliens. The initial authority given the CIA for covert operations under NSC-4A did not establish formal procedures for either coordinating or approving these operations. How many of you understand what I just said to you? Not too many. Let me explain it. What this means, the initial authority given the CIA for covert operations under NSC-4 Alpha did not establish formal procedures for either coordinating or approving these operations. That means they had to answer to no one. It means go do what you got to do. Don't bring any dirt back here because we don't want to see it. Just get the job done. Don't ask anybody. Don't report to anybody. That's exactly what it means. It simply directed the DCI, which is the Director of Central Intelligence, to undertake covert actions and to ensure, through liaison with state and defense, that the resulting operations were consistent with American policy. The only guideline was that it was consistent with American policy. Later, NSC 10-1 and NSC 10-2 were to supersede NSC 4 and NSC 4A, and NSC 10/1 was to establish the Office of Policy Coordination, or the OPC, was chartered to carry out an expanded program of covert activities. It was directly responsible for the alien task projects, and it was the direct forerunner of MJ-12. NSC 10-1 and 10-2 validated illegal and extra-legal practices and procedures as being agreeable to the national security leadership. Reaction, of course, was very swift. In the eyes of the intelligence community, no holes were barred. Under NSC 10-1, an executive coordination group was established to review but not approve covert project proposals. Why? Because if you've ever read or known anything about President Truman, he was a mean little guy, and he didn't believe in trusting everybody else to do the right thing, and he kept the power solidly in his hands. He did not give it to anyone. The ECG was secretly tasked to coordinate the alien projects. NSC 10/1 and 2 were interpreted to mean that no one at the top wanted to know about anything until it was over and successful. These actions established a buffer between the president and the information, and it's important that you understand this because it's important later. It was intended that this buffer serve as a means for the president to deny knowledge if leaks divulge the true state of affairs. That is to prevent the collapse of the government. If the president can stand up and say, I didn't know about it, the government can survive. If the president cannot say that, then you have a very, very dangerous situation indeed. The buffer was used in later years for the purpose of effectively isolating succeeding presidents from any knowledge of the alien presence other than what the secret government and the intelligence community wanted them to know.
The declassified government document reports a sudden change just before 2 a.m. on the morning of February 25th.
The reports indicate that radar picked up a target 120 miles off the coast of Los Angeles. So right out here, the object comes due west, comes in east towards Malibu, and then starts to turn southward right over here, Santa Monica, towards Los Angeles.
At 2:21 a.m., as the object appears to approach the city, a blackout is ordered. February 25th, 1942. Something appears in the skies over Los Angeles. Only 3 months after Pearl Harbor, anti-aircraft batteries are scanning the skies for Japanese planes.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles. Far slower than an airplane.
Over 250 anti-aircraft guns point to the skies. Inexperienced gunners nervously await a possible invasion.
We have 3-inch artillery shells, 50 calibers, mortars.
By 2:30, the gunners were told that they were on green alert status 1, which is fire at will.
At 2:43 a.m., an officer reports something in the sky south of downtown Los Angeles.
Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark skies, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced.
The Army dispatched planes to intercept the objects, but with no reported success.
Some claim they see entire squadrons of heavy bombers in formation.
Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action. Although some watchers say they saw airplanes in the air, semi-official sources say they probably were the U.S. Army's pursuit. Several observers say they saw one or more planes spotlighted by 20 or 30 searchlights. The object moved southward, presumably over Huntington Park at the western edge of Los Angeles, and on southward to about Long Beach on the coast. By 3:30 a.m., observers said the object appeared to be over the south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their glare. Shells frequently could be seen bursting near the object, but none appeared to hit it.
They fired at will.
One Los Angeles Herald Express writer, who observed some of the incident, insisted that anti-aircraft shells had struck one of the objects several times.
We could see clearly the shells blowing up on the bottom of this big vehicle, making no indication that there was any damage to it.
Would a blimp or weather balloon have survived direct hits from heavy anti-aircraft artillery?
The shooting stopped about 3:30 a.m. The shooting brought warfare to the front door of this city of 1.25 million population for the first time since December 7th. Already it was alert to the presence off the Southern California coast of a Japanese submarine which had pumped 25 shells into an oil field north of Santa Barbara Monday evening.
On February 23rd at about 7:30 p.m., Franklin Roosevelt was giving a pep talk to the citizens of the United States.
We must be set to face a long war against crafty and powerful bandits. The attack at Pearl...
Simultaneously, one of the Japanese submarines surfaced off the coast of Elwood, which is near Santa Barbara, California, and began lobbing shells at the oil fields there.
California oil wells near Santa Barbara are hit by shells from a Japanese submarine.
It's the first Japanese attack on mainland USA. Eyewitnesses report the submarine is headed south towards Los Angeles.
Because of the presence of the submarine, a 3-hour alert was ordered at dusk last night, and civilian authorities stood at their posts while the Army and Navy continued their search for the submersible. The evening alert ended at 10:23 p.m., but another was sounded at 2:22 a.m., and the blackout followed within 3 minutes. It covered Los Angeles County from Santa Monica to Pomona. At 2:27, all Southern California radio stations were ordered off the air, except those in San Diego. Approximately 20 minutes after the firing died down, the ship returned and headed westward from Long Beach toward Santa Monica.
At Santa Monica, the object or objects disappeared out towards the Pacific.
The guns went into action again, hurling round after round of shells at the object.
Firing 76mm shells into the air like crazy.
And after firing 1,400 high-explosive shells into the sky, the U.S. military doesn't bring down a single enemy target.
Over 1,400 shells would be fired at the mystery objects.
Shells were coming down into neighborhoods. A number of people were killed.
6 people are confirmed to have died.
The second barrage appeared to be closer to downtown Los Angeles, since watchers could hear the concussion of the guns more clearly, and the flash of bursting shells was brighter. Then the ship disappeared for the second time over the ocean. We return you now to CBS in New York. Army officials declined to comment that the object might have been a blimp.
Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox believes nothing was over Los Angeles. He calls it a false alarm due to war nerves, an overreaction by inexperienced American soldiers. It might seem to be simply a case of war jitters, except the radar picked up something. It's key evidence as to why the military ordered Green Alert Status 1. The after-action reports from the history of the 4th Anti-Aircraft Command give a clear indication that something was over LA.
The official record confirms without a doubt there were 3 different radar sets that tracked this object off the coast as it came in and down the coastline.
Official reports show a target first spotted at 1:44 a.m., 120 miles off the coast. For almost 45 minutes, 3 separate radar operators follow it.
In my opinion, I really think it was mass hysteria that set off all that anti-aircraft fire. I think they were shooting at Jupiter that night.
Yeah, that's it, Ticket.
7 decades later, declassified U.S. government and military documents shed new light on what really happened on the morning of February 25th, 1942.
I felt that some enormous extraterrestrial vehicle had made a pass over Southern California.
NSC 10-2 established a study panel which met secretly and was made up of the scientific minds of the day and may very well have included some of those names which are on the fraudulent document known as Majestic 12 or the Eisenhower briefing document.
Washington, D.C., 1947. Top secret UFO investigation agency, the Majestic 12, has been created to combat an increasing alien threat. But who are these men?
Which is in reality a contingency plan to lead you right through the Rose Garden. The study panel was not called MJ-12. In fact, the study panel was never called MJ-12. Another NSC memo, NSC 10/5, further outlined the duties of the study panel. These NSC memos and secret executive orders set the stage for the creation of MJ-12 only 4 years later. Now it gets nasty.
Forrestal is the man behind the scenes.
James Forrestal began to object to the secrecy. He was a very idealistic and religious man who believed that the public should be told. When he began to talk to leaders of the opposition party and leaders of the Congress about the alien problem, he was asked, which is a polite way of saying you're fired, to resign by Truman. He expressed his fears to many people and rightfully believed that he was being watched and that his life was threatened. This was interpreted by those who were ignorant of the facts as paranoia, because most people had no knowledge of what was really going on. Forrestal later was said to have suffered a mental breakdown and was admitted, they say, actually, he was committed to Bethesda Naval Hospital against his will. In fact, it was feared that Forrestal would begin to talk again and he had to be isolated, discredited, and shut up. Sometime in the early morning of May 22nd, 1949, agents of the CIA tied a sheet around his neck, fastened the other end to a fixture in his room, and threw James Forrestal out the window. The sheet tore, and he plummeted to his death, and he became one of the first victims of the cover-up. The live alien that had been taken from the 1949 Roswell crash was called EB. It was short for extraterrestrial biological entity, and all aliens are not called EB. EB had a tendency to lie, and for over a year would give only the desired answers to questions asked. Those questions which would have resulted in an undesirable answer went unanswered. At some point during the second year of captivity, he began to open up, and the information derived from EB was startling, to say the least. And this compilation of his revelations became the foundation of what would later be finished, called the Yellow Book. Photographs were taken of EB, which among others I and Bill English were to view years later in Grudge 13. Photographs were taken of EB, which among others I and Bill English were to view years later in Grudge 13.